You're listening to Atlanta Baseball Talk, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta Braves.
Welcome to show number 307. Today's Sunday, July 19th, 2015, and my name is Steve. I am joined by both Hamilton and Curtis. And guys, in tonight's show, we'll talk about the Cubs series, the Fredi Gonzalez extension, and this week's John Hart interview with Jeff Schultz. First, we are very happy to be joined by Kevin McAlpin, the Braves beat reporter for the Braves flagship station, 680 The Fan. Kevin, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it. All right, so Kevin, let's start with the trade deadline. John Hart was very clear in the Jeff Schultz interview this week that the Braves would not be big buyers. I think that everyone's assumption is, maybe Johnson moves, not much else is going to happen. One, do you agree with that? And two, do you think there's a scenario like, let's say the stars align, the Braves are 2 games out of first place on the 30th or the 31st, and any of this changes?
Well, in talking to John Hart on Friday, when the second half resumed at Turner Field, he was pretty open and honest about the Braves' plans for the trade deadline. He said, look, we're going to have some pieces that teams are going to be interested in. I think namely Jim Johnson's going to be a guy that team contenders are going to be looking at, making phone calls on. I think Juan Uribe, A.J. Pierzynski, and even Kelly Johnson are other guys that teams that are in the hunt, in the mix, would be very interested in. Now, that being said, John Hart says, we have a plan. We know what we want to do going forward over the next handful of years, and if we don't feel like we're going to get the right value in return, we're not going to make trades just to make trades. So at the end of the day, obviously, when you look at where this team is and where the organization is, they're building towards 2017. They've done a really nice job rebuilding the farm system, bringing in a lot of young talent, a lot of which we've seen on display here throughout the course of this season. But I think the misconception might be that the fact that the Braves are just going to throw in the towel and sell off all their pieces. And again, John Hart said, if we don't get the value we feel like we deserve, we're not going to just go out and make these moves just for the sake of making them. So I think it'll be very interesting. His phone, hopefully it's got a good battery on his cell phone, because I know he's going to be getting a ton of calls between now and the end of July, and he'll get some more in the month of August as well. But, I think if they continue to hang around, if they can put together a good 2-week stretch between now and the end of the month, I do think they'll try to go out and find ways to make this team competitive between now and the end of the season. Again, they're not just they're not just looking at 2017. They want to be competitive, and they want to win ball games between now and then as well.
Okay, so speaking of more from John Hart yesterday when the season resumed, or the second half resumed, a somewhat surprise extension announced for Fredi. So through the next season and an option for 2017. But it's a strange time, in my opinion, for an announcement about a manager extension. Any theories about the timing?
Well, I think the way the Braves have done things over the years, they don't like to have the lame duck guy in there, not really knowing what the future is going to be. And I agree with you. It was interesting timing. I think it caught a lot of us off guard. That being said, I'm not surprised that Fredi will be back for next year. I think that, where this organization is, again, with the retooling process that's going on, you've got a manager that I think if you were going to make that change, you would have made it coming into this season rather than going into 2016. So, again, John Hart said they're going to try to go out this offseason. They're going to try to find ways to continue to improve the ball club. So I think 2016 is really going to be a very big measuring stick for Fredi Gonzalez on how he's able to take the next step. I think you look at what he's accomplished here since he took over for Bobby Cox. Huge shoes to fill, obviously. I mean, that's a very tough spot for anybody to be in, taking over after a Hall of Fame manager retires. But, the 4th best winning percentage in the National League since he took control, I think that the Braves feel like, what he's done to this point has been enough that they feel like they're going to give him every opportunity going forward to see if he can take this team to the next level. And obviously the postseason has been disappointing. They've gotten there with the wild card in 12. They won the division, but lost in 4 to the Dodgers. But yeah, it's interesting timing. But what I like about it is they're keeping the coaching staff intact. They're keeping everybody around. And the biggest thing I think that may be flying under the radar with this news yesterday is the fact that Roger McDowell isn't going anywhere. We know how important he's been as the pitching coach for this organization for many, many years now. And I think that's maybe one of those things that, you see the coaching staff will be back, but you don't really put in perspective that you're keeping around one of the probably one of the most sought-after pitching coaches. If Roger was able to go out there and was not extended, there was going to be teams lining up interested in him in his services. So it was weird timing, but I think it was the right move to do. Now you've got Fredi, who can just focus on the rest of this season, and they can they can keep going and keep trying to improve this ball club as they continue this rebuilding process.
All right, so let's look back to the offseason with all the moves. So in that same Jeff Schultz article, John Hart went on to say that the players that the Braves really wanted in the Justin Upton trade had been packaged in a different trade. So the Braves ended up with other players, guys like Jace Peterson and Malik Smith. Do you have any idea who the Braves were originally targeting? Was Yasmani Grandal in that list?
You know what? I've not gotten any indication on who the Braves had been interested in. I do know that there's a couple of guys that, there's been a couple of young prospects. Namely, I think you look at a guy like Matt Whistler, and he was a guy that was one of the top prospects as far as pitching goes with the Padre organization, and he was a guy I know the Braves were really, really interested in. So I haven't gotten any sense if Grandal was one of them or who else may have been out there. But again, I think when you look at the overall big picture of things, the way, sometimes trades don't work out the first time around, but you find a way to revisit them and maybe change a piece or two here or there. So John Hart's been very creative with the moves he's made over the last year since really taking over the reins in September of 2014. So I have not gotten the sense one way or the other if Grandal was one of the guys that they had serious discussions about.
All right, so sticking with the catching position and moving on to Christian Bethancourt. So John Hart did not mince words in that interview about some of the reasons that Bethancourt was sent down to AAA, talking about his preparedness, things like showing up early, preparing for games, going over scouting reports. Well, these things seem so fundamental to me. Was this situation apparent to you? In the, let's say, the last month while he was up with the team, and were you? So, if the answer is yes, were you surprised he was sent down?
You know what? I wasn't terribly surprised if he was sent down, just because you look at his last 5 starts. I believe there was 4 pass balls and 5 starts, and that's a concern. That's a major issue. When you've got a young catcher. You don't want to see those type of mental mistakes repeated over the course of about a week span. So I wasn't surprised they decided to make the move and send him down. It's hard for guys to work on things at the big league level, and the fact that A.J. Pierzynski got off to such a great start and continues really to swing the bat much better, I think, than any of us could have anticipated when he signed here this offseason. It's very hard for a guy like Christian, if he's not playing every single day, to be able to work on some of those fundamental things. So I think they felt like, go down to AAA, play every day, and let's see where things stand. And, Christian's still a guy that I think the Braves feel very highly about. They feel like he's going to be a big part of this team's future going forward. That being said, there were some things he needed to work on from an offensive and a defensive standpoint. And really, if you're not playing every day here in the majors, there's only so much work you can do on the side to get those types of reps. So I wasn't entirely caught off guard when they made that decision. And again, when you've got a guy like Pierzynski who has a track record, he's able to play every day. He's been able to do that for the better part of the last 10 years. I think he's caught an average of 130 games. So he's a workhorse. He can catch every day. And when he's having the type of the type of offensive outburst he's had this season, it makes sense to send Christian down to work on those things at AAA.
So, Kevin, do you think that Christian was reacting in sort of a negative way to not being just given the job, Pierzynski getting off to that hot start, not getting a ton of starts week to week? Did in your opinion, did that add to his lack of preparation?
I don't think so. I think when you look at Christian and his track record, the one question mark throughout the years of coming up through the minors has been his defense, and can he do it? Can he handle a major league pitching staff on a day in and day out basis? So that's been the question mark for him, the last couple of seasons, and is he ready to take that next step? So I don't think that the lack of playing time affected him. I don't think he was touting. I had a chance to visit with Christian quite a bit when he was up here earlier this season, and he talked about working with Julio Teheran and going into the video room and what he's learned, about the preparation when you go make that jump to the big leagues and you're here every day. And again, I think A.J. Pierzynski did a really nice job sort of taking him under his wing and helping prepare him for life as an everyday catcher. It didn't work out, unfortunately, but, again, I think in the big grand scheme of things, Christian is still part of the plans, the long-term plans. But I really don't think that the lack of playing time was something that affected him, or he pouted or moaned or just maybe lost focus. I don't think that had anything to do with it.
Okay, let's move on to Julio Teheran. So the question for most of the season has been what's wrong with Teheran, and aside from he's the weird home road splits, but also his pitches are getting a lot of the plate when he gets knocked around. There was a quote from Lavarnway after his start in Milwaukee early in July. That was the 3-run homer that Avilan gave up game where Teheran had given up 2 walks in the first inning and then he settled down. And Lavarnway after the game said, quote, "Yeah, sometimes it takes a little kick in the pants for him to flip the switch and get angry and get real competitive." Now, that was the first time I'd heard about that mental aspect for Teheran's game. Is that something that the Braves are aware of, working on with him? Is this more of a mental thing maybe with Teheran than anything else?
I think so, yeah, and you're right. Those home and road splits are alarming. The ERA is a little over 2 at home, and it's about 7.5 on the road this season. I mean, the numbers just don't make a lot of sense. Lefties especially have had a ton of success against Julio, but I do think it's become a mental thing. There's really no rhyme or reason to why he has such success at Turner Field and why he struggles on the road. And I think when you look Friday night, he was getting into one of those situations where it could have turned into a big inning. That's really been Julio's downfall this year. Is it just seems like it's been one inning where things unravel in a hurry. And I think Fredi Gonzalez, he was questioned about making that decision to take him out after 4 2/3 and to go to the bullpen. It worked out. I think it was the right decision. Again, from a mental standpoint, you've got a guy that has been troubled by the big inning this season. You get him out of there. Obviously, Julio wants to stay in the game, and you love the fact that he's competitive enough to come out and say it afterwards, that, he wanted to go out there. He wanted the chance to face Rizzo with 2 on and 2 out in the inning. But, Freddie felt like the best move was to go to the bullpen and bring in Detweiler. And again, it worked out. But it's really hard to explain with Julio this year, because you look back at last year, the strides he took. He was an all-star in 2014. I mean, this guy was, looked like he could be, taking over as the ace of the rotation. And just the numbers this year are really bizarre, especially with, how much success he has at Turner Field and how much he struggles on the road. And that's why I love what the Braves did in starting him the first game back after the break. Gets him 2 starts here at home before the team goes on their final 3-city road trip of the year.
Would you have been surprised by that Lavarnway quote last year?
Probably. Yeah, I think I would have been. I don't think that, Julio is the type of guy that you don't see a whole lot of him in the clubhouse. And, that's because he's a hard worker. He's in the weight room. He's watching film. He's doing scouting reports. He's talking to the catchers about what to expect his next time out there. So it would have surprised me. If Ryan would have come out and said that last year, I probably would have been taken a lot more by surprise. But, again, I think when you hear a veteran catcher who says sometimes you need to go out there and light a fire under him, and I think that we saw that work. Maybe that's another situation where Freddie says, you know what, we're taking you out, and that's something that Julio can think about for the next 4 days, about being taken out of that situation, and the manager not having 100% trust in him to get out of that spot there.
Yeah. All right, let's stick with the starting pitching. Mark Bowman reported that Foltynewicz walked off the field mid-side session at Fenway a few days before he was sent down for the first time to AAA. How much of it do you think is a question of maturity for Folty as opposed to, he needs to get his secondary pitches better?
Well, I think for Folty, he's a very intense guy. I've enjoyed being around him, just getting a chance to see him grow from the start of spring training, from a guy that was trying to win a roster spot and was trying to go out there and just impress and show the organization why they traded for him, to the guy he is now. And of course, I know he's back at AAA. He's sort of bounced back and forth here the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's a maturity thing for him. He's a very, very competitive guy. He wants to go out there and he wants to win and he wants to be in this starting rotation. Long term, I do think that's where he's going to be. There's been some questions Could he be a back of the bullpen guy? Could he even have closer type stuff? But I do think long term his plans are to be in the rotation. But I don't know that it's a maturity thing. He's been in the big leagues and he wants to stay in the big leagues. Trust me, taking the trip up to Gwinnett's not a lot of fun for these guys that have gotten to this level. They don't want to go back and forth. They want to stick around. So I don't think it's a matter of maturity for Folty. I think he's a very mature guy. And again, I think he's the type of guy that you like to see young pitchers and young players that hate to lose, that hate to fail, that they want to do whatever they can do to work out their struggles. Similar situation for Folty with Bethancourt. It's hard to work on things, especially those secondary pitches, if they're not working here at the big league level. Coming out of the bullpen, you don't have a chance to use all four pitches. So, again, another opportunity for him to go down and to really, work on some things mechanically at AAA, and we'll see him back here. He'll be back here sooner rather than later, and I still think when you've got electric stuff like he does, he's got a chance to be a starter in the big leagues for a long, long time.
All right, Kevin, let's wrap up with a lightning round. Okay, get ready.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Maben is a Brave on August 1st.
Yes, he will be a Brave on August 1st.
Maben is a Brave opening day next year.
Man, I do think that they're going to get a lot of phone calls on Cameron Maben, but I think where the Braves are as far as center field right now, I'll say yes. I'll say he will be the opening day center fielder in 2016.
I agree. I think it's a bargain, and to worry that this isn't the real Cameron Maben at this point seems kind of silly. But, okay. Yeah. Folty opens the season in the starting rotation next year.
I will say, oh man, you're putting me on the spot. I'll say true. I'll say he opens the season in the rotation next year.
All right, at the halfway point, the Braves team MVP.
Well, I think we just talked about him. I think Cameron Maben is the type of guy that you wonder where this team would be without him. So I think it comes down to either Cameron Maben or maybe even A.J. Pierzynski. You wonder where this offense would be without either two of those guys, and I think I would probably have to give the edge to Cameron Maben. He came over right before the opener. We weren't exactly sure what his role was going to be. Eric Young was looking like he was going to be the everyday center fielder, and so I'll go with Cameron Maben.
Yeah, according to Baseball Reference, Maben and Freeman are tied with the largest offensive WAR number on the team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Losing Freddie Freeman is a huge blow, and if he was healthy, if we hadn't been talking about missing Freddie Freeman for a month, I'd probably throw his name in that conversation. But right now, as far as overall body work, I think it has to be Cameron Maben.
Yep. All right, where are the Braves in the standings on July 31st? How many games back or ahead, Kevin? Ahead,
Well, that would take one heck of a 2-week stretch for them to be ahead. I think they're probably going to be hovering right around the 500 mark. I think they're probably going to end up being, 5 or 6 or 7 games back, probably where they are right about now. So I think, they're a few games under. They're half a dozen games behind the Nationals, and they're still hanging around. And I think they have the chance to do that for the majority of the season. I think they have the chance to be close to a 500 team when all's said and done.
Okay. At the start of the season, how many games did you predict the Braves would win, and what do you predict now that the Braves will win by the end of the season?
It's funny. I never made an official prediction this season. I did think right around 80 seemed like a pretty legit number, and I'm going to stick with it. I think 80, 81, I think they'll be right around where they were last year, if that makes any sense. And you know what? For all the moves that were made, for all the changes that were made, when you look at last year's team compared to this year's team, that's not so bad if you're a team that's right around 500 at the end of this season. So I'll stick with right around 80, I believe.
It would be remarkable if they could match or even better by a game or two their win-loss record from last year, given everything that walked out of the door and all the, not exciting pieces that walked in the door. It would really say something about what John Hart and Fredi did this year if they could pull that off. And I think it really is possible as well.
Yeah, the future's so bright. I mean, I think, when you look at what John Hart has done, what John Coppolella has done, John Sherholtz, this transitionary team, what they've been able to accomplish over the last calendar year is nothing short of remarkable. Teams don't go from a bottom 5 farm system to a top 5 farm system within a matter of a handful of months. That's what the Braves have done this year. And I think, you look at AAA, you look at all the talent that's there, you even go down to AA. there's a handful of guys there that are waiting in the wings. The future is extremely bright. There's a lot to be excited about for this organization. Again, you're going to have to go through some bumps along the road to get back to where you want to be, and I think that's what this team's going through while still trying to stay competitive. The future is very, very bright. It's a lot of fun to check the box scores from the minor league ball clubs this season to see what some of these young players are doing and the growth that they're having to this point.
All right, folks, you can hear Kevin every day on the Braves flagship, 680 The Fan, and follow him on Twitter at Kevin McAlpin and also on Instagram. Kevin, thanks so much for your time today. We look forward to speaking to you again.
Enjoyed it as always. Thanks for having me.
So, guys, a tough start to the second half as the Braves dropped 2 of 3 to the Cubs. Little offense, some pretty good starting pitching from the Cubs does not equal a lot of wins. So, Ham, you predicted, well, you started with a 1-2 prediction, switched it to 2-1 at the last minute.
Foolishly.
Yeah. So, did anything surprise you from this series, the start of the second half, coming off the Grilly injury, the 4-game sweep, all of that?
No, not really. Not really at all. And I'm disappointed that I think we're as inept as we are without Freeman on offense. I was hoping for a little bit more of a spark or something, and we just could not get the hits when we needed them. And of course, the pitching was great, but we just couldn't come through, and we're bad without Freeman.
Yeah, Curtis, how about you? You predicted correctly 1-2.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's what this team is right now. They're not going to be able to compete against these good teams, and with Freeman being out, they have even less of a chance. And there's guys that are really – Peterson's still not doing anything. Angelton's really bad.
Yeah, he and Peterson both have cooled down tremendously.
And so just to have – and I mean, nothing against some of the guys they're putting in there, but it gets the feel of a team waiting to sell off some pieces. And it is amazing. I saw this stat after the game regarding Shelby Miller, and again, it's another. It's seemingly, and I did tweet it today, but it seemed just another Shelby Miller start where there's a ground ball that could potentially be a double play that doesn't happen. He walks Ross, who's batting 179 or something, and then gives up a hit with the bases loaded. But it's been 2 months since he's won a game, and it's been a month since he has pitched and the Braves scored while he was in the game.
Yeah, amazing. And I may be making this up, but it feels like Peterson's always the one that makes that error behind Shelby.
So, yeah, I'm not really all that shocked by it.
Yeah. And I know it's kind of incorrect because Perez has actually been doing pretty well, but like when I see Perez in the lineup or Gomes, it's that one piece. It speaks to how thin the lineup is with Fredi out, which then leads to a lot of Perez and Gomes or Chris Johnson. It's just the lineup feels so thin.
Yeah.
Well, and it's pretty ridiculous that Chris Johnson gets to play at all. I mean, I know that with the Heat, Kelly Johnson can't play every single day, but I mean, Chris Johnson provides nothing.
He's
I think
not hitting that, and that. What was it last night? Right, Saturday night, the throw from Uribe that bounced in front of Johnson that he should have gotten. And it went by him and rolled down the first base line, and the guy scored. I mean, it was a dreadful play. He looks bad. Sorry,
he's no value, and Kelly Johnson is one of the few bright spots we have offensively on this team right now. So it's pretty pathetic that Fredi is making those types of decisions, and for what end? I mean, I guess it was the lefty righty and all that kind of stuff, but I mean,
but those stats don't even bear it out.
And we're not in it to, do matchups and stuff like that. I mean, we need to get anything we can out of a lineup that he can cobble together.
I turned to my son after that error last night. I said, Chris Johnson's going to get DFA'd on Sunday, which I didn't really believe, but I wouldn't have been totally shocked if he had.
Yeah.
Because really, I mean, you put him in there against lefties, because that's the only numbers he can put up anymore, although he's not even putting those numbers up since he returned from the DL. He's really providing nothing.
Yeah, we talked about it, and I feel, I think he was on the cusp of whether we thought he would be DFA'd before the end of the season or not, and I think since then he's made nothing but a case that he probably will be gone before the end of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with Freeman out, they're almost halving the runs they scored per game. 18 games, the last 18 games that Freeman was in the lineup, they were scoring almost 5.5 runs a game. With the 17 games he's been out, not even 3 runs a game.
Yeah. Yeah, except for that little burst at the beginning of July when they started 6-1 or 6-2, something like that. The offense has just completely disappeared. All right, so Kurt, on Friday before the start of the Cubs series, the Braves announced that Fredi Gonzalez and the entire coaching staff were being extended through the 16 season with an option for 17. So were you surprised at the move itself or the timing?
I was not. I don't want this show to somehow be real negative, but
Whoops.
Hart made a comment in the interview with Jeff Schultz, which I know we're going to discuss a good bit, but there was a lot in that interview. If people have not seen it, I think it's regretfully buried behind AJC's paywall, which for whatever reason they think their sports section is so important that 80% of the content is behind their paywall.
But you know what? I have found a bunch of links to it that take you right in.
Yeah,
so
and
it's out there. It's out there.
And if you go on Facebook, usually, if you're a AJC fan, follower, whatever, you usually can get access to that stuff. But Hart basically said that he was coming back next year. I mean, there was no bones about it because Jeff Schultz made a comment and said this. So you're saying it's not going to be a tough decision, and John Hart said no, not at all. So I don't think it's a surprise at all to me. I think that we've mentioned that we've thought that Fredi's done a pretty admirable job given the team he has to work with now. But I'm kind of curious as to what could get Fredi fired. I think that with Bobby Cox in the front office, he has such a powerful ally, and he's totally being the good soldier and not complaining about anything. But he also admitted that no other team would hire him. So why wouldn't he find himself in that position? What if the Braves tank? That's all I have left to say. What if they do end up only winning, 35% of the games the rest of the season, and they're just finished and they're awful?
Then they let him go. I mean, I can't believe they're paying him a ton of money. The money has not been announced. It wasn't announced the last time he got an extension. I think that, to answer the question of what would get him fired, it's all about next season. If they don't make the playoffs next season or don't look good, they're going to have more pieces next year. The young pitchers will be better, 1 year, sort of more mature next year. I think that Fredi has got to have a really good showing, make the playoffs, or he's not there to open the new stadium. Ham, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think the timing is sort of weird to me, though. What was the conversation of why at the All-Star break? If they knew they were going to do it all along, why not wait till the end of the season? Why do it now? I don't know what you gain from that. Where they just like, if we get to the All-Star break and our team is just below average, you're on for 2 more years. I think that's a strange thing. But I think what I think it means is that the Braves see Fredi as a good rebuilding manager. Actually, I think we've talked about how he's done remarkable this year with a lot of injuries and rookies and young pieces. He's actually not done so bad, and I think they need someone to steer the ship while they rebuild. And I think the extension of him is another indicator that they're rebuilding and not retooling.
Yeah, and as Kevin McAlpin said, he thinks it's a way to sort of increase the feeling of stability around the organization and lock in Roger for another year, which I think is one of the pieces that does get sort of lost in this. I think that clearly the front office has forgiven the epic collapses, the one playoff game win, and I think that you get the whole whitewashing of, the bad stuff happened under the Frank Wren era. And I think that a lot is forgiven because of that. So you take that plus this overachieving year and you get an extension. And I think that Hart said a lot publicly in that interview with Jeff Schultz, and that may be what forced the timing.
Yeah. But I think it would be unfair to expect Fredi to take the team to the playoffs next season. I think the Braves aren't a season away. That's another conversation. I don't think that. I think maybe it doesn't mean that we don't want a fresh face managing when we get to the new stadium, but I don't think it's realistic to expect to get the postseason next year.
Yeah, and I almost kind of view it that if he can shepherd the team along and even kind of a 500 team this year and next, maybe a little better than 500 next, that he will get rewarded by being the manager with the new pretty things on his roster and in the new shiny stadium.
I agree.
That will be his payoff for having to eat it for this year and next while they figure all these things out.
I think you'd have to have, I bet 500 or 450, 500 winning percentage between now and the next season he comes back.
But I also think that you have a situation where after last season, which was dreadful, Bobby Cox saying what an outstanding job he was doing.
Yeah, he's got that vote of confidence. There's no doubt that that's playing a part in it. All right, continuing with the Hart interview, guys. From John Hart, quote, "I never made any false promises that we were built to win this year. We felt we had an energy and a good makeup, but you don't trade your closer opening day, trade for draft picks, trade middle-of-the-order bats, and expect to win. I won't lie to fans." But Kurt, is he kind of sort of lying to fans?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, we had that closer last year. We had the middle order of the bats last year, and they didn't win. But I also think that he comes out, no, we're not rebuilding. We're going to compete and all this kind of stuff. And then he says, now we're kind of losing. And I mean, what do you expect? We don't have all these things in place. And of course, we're not going to be all that good. And even again, today or yesterday, I read again that he's like, no, of course, we're not rebuilding. What are you talking about? But, if something bad, if they start to lose a bunch of games, what do you think we're doing? We're terrible. We don't have any talent, It's young. It's going to take years to. So, I mean, it does kind of sound like he's having his cake and eating it too, and which of course you cannot lose if you get to argue both sides of the argument.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I'm a huge Hart fan. I think what he's done is nothing short of remarkable.
Agreed, and I think he should be considered GM of the year.
Absolutely. And honestly, I kind of don't care about this controversy that much, although I think it was worth talking about. But I think, yes, to come out and be very adamant that we're not rebuilding, we're retooling, we're following parallel paths of playing for now and playing for 2017. I mean, he said all those things. He used all those phrases. So to then come out and be like, well, we never said we were trying to win this year is just disingenuous, which all the other data points about John Hart and how he talks and his comments to the media, this is the one thing that doesn't ring true that really I've heard all year. Ham?
Yeah, nothing left to say. Totally agree.
All right, guys, let's move on to silver lining then, the thing that happened this week that we can hang our hats on. So, Hammy, what do you got? Slim pickings this week.
Slim pickings, yeah. And you mentioned Yuri Perez, but he was the reason we won the game on Friday. He scored the lone run today. So even though he went 2 for 7, he did have a walk, but good for him.
It was a great at bat in that, it was his second, that game Friday. He had come up to bat with the bases loaded, the at bat before.
Right.
And then again with bases loaded and dumped that single into right field. It was a great at bat.
Yeah.
All right, Curtis, what do you got?
I'm cheating, by the way. I'm going with Kelly Johnson, and it's really more for the month than it is just the week, but I don't know that we've given him enough credit. We haven't really talked about the contributions that he's made to this team over the course of the year enough, I think. In July, he did go 0 for 3 with 2 Ks today. I will add that. But up till today, this month he's batted .342 with a .419 OBP. He's had 3 homers and 12 RBI, which sadly lead the team in both categories for the month of July. But I do want to give a little nod to the contributions, especially with Fredi out, that Kelly Johnson has been making to the Braves.
Yeah. And I will go, and I will admit that this is setting the bar real low. But to me, the silver lining is that we didn't get no hit Saturday against John Lester, and that A.J. Przinsky, took all the doubt out of it. Because as depressing as this weekend was, and scoring 5 runs across 3 games, getting no hit, and being on the front page of ESPN and just all that jazz. It just adds so much misery to it. So thank goodness we didn't get no hit on Saturday. All right, guys, next up is Shot in the Dark, brought to you by Front Row Seats, where you can get the best deals on tickets online for Braves games, concerts, anything that you're looking for. Go out and visit frontrowseatsllc.com and use discount code ABT, and you won't be charged any service fees. Again, that's frontrowseatsllc.com. All right, so guys, we'll start with our listener pick for Shot in the Dark. It was from our Twitter follower, Frederick Merkel, and it was that the Braves would hold the Cubs to 5 runs over the entire series. Unfortunately, the Cubs scored 2, 4, and 4, a total of 10 runs this weekend. And you'd think if you hold a team to an average of a little over 3 per game, you got a pretty good chance of taking the series. But you would think. But when you
have 7 hits in 2 games.
Yeah, and 5 runs in 3 games, exactly.
I wonder if he's related to Angela Merkel.
I don't know.
Maybe it is Angela Merkel using a code name, a not very good code name.
All right, before we get to our predictions for this coming week, guys, let's check back and look at how we did last week. So, Kurt, you went all-star break for your prediction.
Yeah, I did.
That Jason Kipnis would win the all-star MVP.
Yes, he did.
And with his 0 for 1 and 1 strikeout, I'm guessing that he came in second in the voting.
Just
Mike Trout narrowly beat him out.
Robbed.
And it was controversial.
Ham, you predicted that Markakis would hit his first home run of the season this weekend against Chicago.
Also
And
close.
The drought continues.
I was 0 for 1.
My God, seriously, he just needs to hit his home run so that us and our followers on Twitter stop suggesting that that's going to be the shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Because people need to expand their... anyway, all right, I predicted that Freddie Freeman would return this weekend and hit 2 home runs in his first game back. So I got to be wrong about 2 things on that prediction. So no winner this week.
Well, shouldn't Ham and I tie because you were wrong about 2 things and we were only wrong about 1 thing?
Yes.
Yeah, no, sorry. So Ham and I remain tied at 1 for the month of July. All right, Curtis, what do you got for this coming week?
Our old friend Brandon Beachy takes the bump tomorrow night. 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 7 Ks for Beachy coming back into town against his old team.
Does he get the win?
Oh.
This will not be held against you.
Yeah. Bonus.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right, Ham, what do you got?
I'm going to use my badness at Shot in the Dark for good again. I predict Jason Hayward is going to bat over 400 and hit at least 1 homer against us.
I've been thinking about it's the Cardinals, and that's going to be hard and all that stuff. I'd really forgotten about the whole Hayward aspect of it. Yeah, God, I really hope you're wrong, Ham. All right, so, Kurt, I'm going to oppose you. Stick with Brandon Beachy. I say that the Braves knock Beachy out before he completes 3 innings. All right, everyone, please check out our Shot in the Dark sponsor, Front Row Seats, where you can get the best deals on tickets online, Braves, concerts, whatever you're looking for. Go out and visit frontrowseatsllc.com. Use discount code ABT to avoid service fees. That is frontrowseatsllc.com. All right, so guys, let's take a look at our win-loss predictions we made last week and then look ahead to this week's games. So a 1-2 week. Kurt, you were the only one that got it. Ham and I were overly optimistic with 2-1. Kurt, spot on. Yay, congratulations, hater.
Yes. Go team.
All right, for the week ahead, 6 games. 3 at home against the Dodgers, who just took 2 of 3 from the Nationals, and 3 on the road against the Cardinals. So let's look at the pitching matchups. Game 1, in the Dodgers series, Whistler goes up against Brandon Beachy, as you said, Kurt. So he's making his second start for the Dodgers. He went 4 innings and gave up 3 earned in his first start. It's then Alex Wood against Brett Anderson in his 3.17 ERA. He held the Braves to 2 earned over 7 innings in May. And then in the day game on Wednesday, it's Teheran versus Mike Bolzinger and his 3.04 ERA. So we miss Kershaw, we miss Greinke.
Wow.
Yeah, seriously.
But we do get a Bolzinger.
Yeah, who likes that? It's on to St. Louis, where it'll be Banuelos, John Lackey, and his surprising 2.9 ERA.
Wow.
Followed by Shelby Miller and Tim Cooney. his 3.33 ERA, and then Whistler with his second start of the week against Carlos Martinez and his 2.47 ERA.
Good Lord.
I know. So, Ham, what do you got for this week? What will the Braves go?
I will not be fooled again. 2-4, 1-2, 1-2.
All right, Curtis?
I'm changing my prediction.
Oh.
1-5.
Yeah, I knew you were going south.
1-2, 0-3.
Yeah, God,
that pitching is intimidating. Although the Cardinals have not been so dominant
They've
as of
slowed
late.
down. They've
A
slowed
bit.
down. Yeah.
Didn't Hayward didn't he go on a tear? Hadn't he been playing much?
Hayward went bonkers in June. All of June was amazing. I don't know. I haven't looked in July, but I know that he went bonkers in June. But I'm going to go 4-2 because I got to still keep hope alive, and I got to get that 8-4 over these 12 games. I'm in a bit of a hole, you know.
You're behind.
See, if we gone 2-1 this weekend, then we just go 2-1 for all the series. I have my 8-4, so they got to really.
It's just that
step
simple.
it up. It's just that simple.
And
right,
Ham,
guys.
we're right on track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys, that is the show. Everyone, please make sure that you have us in your RSS feeds or subscriptions on iTunes or Stitcher so that you don't miss any of our weekly shows. And as always, check us out at atlantabaseballtalk.com for past shows, to check out our blogs and to post in our comments section. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at ATL Baseball Talk and to like us on Facebook. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and go Braves!
Thanks for listening to Atlanta Baseball Talk, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta Braves. To find new shows, to post in our forum, or to send a comment, please visit us at atlantabaseballtalk.com.